The message came through at 3 in the morning, ship time. Captain Daniel Price was sleeping in his quarters when the alarm pulled him from a dreamless rest. He dressed quickly and made his way to the bridge of the horizon's edge, a human diplomatic vessel stationed near the edge of known space. Commander Lisa Grant was already there, her face tight with concern as she stared at the main screen. She had served with Daniel for 6 years, and he had learned to read her expressions. Whatever had arrived was not good news. "What do we have?" Daniel asked as he took his seat. Lisa transferred the message to the main display. Static filled the screen at first, then cleared to reveal a face that was not human. The being had compound eyes that reflected light in dozens of tiny mirrors, and its mandibles clicked rapidly as it spoke. This was one of the peaceful species known throughout the galaxy for their medical research and their absolute commitment to nonviolence. The on-screen was named, and Daniel had met him twice before at diplomatic functions. He had always seemed calm, almost serene in the way his species usually appeared. But now his movements were frantic, and his voice carried a tone that needed no translation. "Please," said in the recording, "we are begging anyone who receives this message. The Dominion has invaded They came without warning, without demands, without mercy. Our orbital stations are destroyed. Our cities are burning. We have no weapons, no armies, no way to fight back. 8 billion of our people will die unless someone helps us. Please, we have nowhere else to turn." The message ended, and silence filled the bridge. Daniel turned to look at Ambassador Shaw, who had arrived during the playback. Was young for his position, barely 30 years old, with an idealistic streak that sometimes clashed with the harsh realities of galactic politics. Right now his face was pale. "Have we contacted the Assembly?" Daniel asked. Nodded slowly. "I sent an emergency request 2 hours ago when the first fragments of this message arrived. I just received their response." He pulled up the document on his personal screen and read aloud. "The Galactic Assembly acknowledges the situation on Prime. A committee will be formed to investigate the claims and determine appropriate diplomatic responses. Initial discussions are scheduled for the next regular session, approximately 93 standard days from now." Lisa made a sound that was not quite a word. Daniel understood her reaction perfectly. 3 months. The Assembly wanted to talk about forming a committee in 3 months while 8 billion people faced extermination. "That cannot be right," Daniel said, though he knew it was. The Assembly had always moved slowly. They debated everything, considered all perspectives, weighed every consequence. It was how they had maintained peace among 47 species for centuries, but peace meant nothing to the dead. Set down his screen. "I have tried contacting individual representatives. They say this is a matter for the full Assembly. They express sympathy but claim they cannot act unilaterally. Everyone is sorry but no one will help." Daniel stood and walked to the viewport. Stars filled the darkness outside, cold and distant and indifferent to the suffering of any species. Somewhere out there, past those stars, a peaceful civilization was dying because no one wanted to break protocol. He thought about his daughter back on Earth, about the life his people had built among the stars over the past 3 centuries. Humanity had joined the Galactic Assembly 60 years ago, a minor species with limited influence and a small fleet. They were told to be grateful for membership, to stay quiet, to learn from their betters. And for 60 years, that was exactly what they had done. "Contact Earth Command," Daniel said quietly. Lisa looked at him with surprise. "Sir." "Send them the full message send them the Assembly's response, and send them my recommendation." "Which is?" Daniel turned to face his crew. These were good people, professionals who had dedicated their lives to service. He knew what he was about to ask could end his career, could end all of their careers. But some things mattered more than careers. "My recommendation is that we respond to the request for aid. Immediately. without waiting for assembly approval that will never come. Stepped forward. Captain, that would be unprecedented. No minor species has ever taken military action without assembly authorization. The political consequences alone could be devastating. They are dying right now, Ambassador. What consequences matter more than that? No one had an answer. Daniel composed the message himself, keeping it short and direct. He explained the situation, attached all relevant data, and made his request clear. He asked for permission to help people who had asked for help. Then he sent it and waited. The hours that followed were the longest of his life. Lisa brought him coffee that went cold in his hands, paced the bridge until Daniel ordered him to sit. The crew worked at their stations, pretending to focus on routine tasks while everyone listened for the signal that would carry their fate. It arrived 4 hours after his message was sent. 4 hours for a decision that would change everything. Daniel read it alone at first, then read it again to make sure he understood. The response from Earth Command contained 2 words: permission granted. Before he could speak, additional messages began flooding in. Fleet mobilization orders spreading across human space. Reserve units called to active duty. Cargo vessels requisitioned for troop transport. Hospital ships preparing for deployment. Supply chains activating across a dozen worlds. Lisa read the data flowing across her screen with wide eyes. Sir, this is not just permission. This is full mobilization. Every available ship, every available soldier. They are sending everything. Daniel nodded slowly. Humanity had asked itself a simple question tonight. Someone was suffering, someone had begged for help, and no one else would answer. What kind of people did humans want to be? The answer was moving toward Prime at faster than light speed. Daniel opened a channel to his crew. All hands, this is the captain. We have received authorization to render aid to our friends on Prime. Set course immediately and prepare for combat operations. I will not lie to you about what we face. They have superior numbers and firepower. Many of us may not survive what comes next, but someone asked for help tonight and we are going to answer. That is what humans do. The horizon's edge turned toward the distant star that warmed the... Behind them, across the vastness of human space, hundreds of other ships were doing the same. They had asked for help, humanity had answered, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The galactic assembly chambers on Centrum Station were designed to inspire awe. The ceiling rose hundreds of meters above the floor, covered in lights that represented every star system in known space. Representatives from 47 species sat in tiered sections arranged in a massive circle, each delegation equipped with translation systems that converted speech into their native languages instantly. Council Speaker had led these proceedings for 200 years. The ancient moved slowly now, his 6 limbs carrying him with careful dignity to the central podium. He had seen crises come and go, wars begin and end, empires rise and fall. Nothing surprised him anymore. Or so he believed, until the human delegation requested emergency speaking time. Secretary General Blake walked to the speaker's platform with a calm that seemed out of place. He was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that revealed nothing of his thoughts. He had served as Earth's primary representative for 8 years, known for his careful diplomacy and willingness to compromise. Today, there would be no compromise. Honored representatives, began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. I stand before you to make a formal announcement on behalf of the United Earth Government. 12 hours ago, we received a distress call from our friends on Prime. The Dominion has invaded their world without provocation, in violation of 7 different treaties. 8 billion civilians face extinction. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Everyone knew about the invasion. The committee to discuss it was scheduled to meet in 90 days. Continued. We submitted an emergency request for assembly intervention. We were told to wait. We were told that procedures must be followed, that discussions must be had, that committees must be formed. He paused. We have decided not to wait. The murmurs became louder. As of 6 hours ago, the United Earth government has declared a state of war against the Dominion. Our Third Fleet, under the command of Admiral Cole, is currently engaging enemy forces in the system. Ground troops are being deployed to assist with civilian evacuation and defense. Hospital ships and supply vessels are en route. For a moment the chamber fell completely silent. Then it erupted. Representatives from a dozen species began shouting at once. Translation systems struggled to keep up with the chaos. Struck the ceremonial chime 3 times before order was restored, and even then the tension remained thick enough to touch. Secretary General Blake said, his ancient voice carrying a weight that silenced the remaining whispers. What you describe is unprecedented. A minor member species cannot declare war without assembly approval. This action violates the charter that your people signed when you joined our community. Nodded. I understand your position, Council Speaker, and I must respectfully inform you that we do not require your permission to help people who have asked for our help. A representative rose from the far side of the chamber, his scaled face twisted with what might have been anger or amusement. You send 80 ships against 500. This is not war, human. This is suicide. Your species has existed among the stars for 3 centuries. You will not exist for 3 more weeks. Perhaps, replied, but we will exist as people who answered when someone called for help. Can you say the same? The representative sat down without responding. Other delegates approached during the recess that followed. Some offered quiet words of support, though none were willing to do so publicly. Most delivered warnings. The ambassador explained that humanity was making a terrible mistake. The liaison suggested that there might still be time to recall the fleet and apologize. A representative from a species had never heard of simply stared at him with what might have been pity. One delegate, a small creature from a world at the edge of known space, asked a question that gave pause. Why would you do this? They have nothing to offer you. They cannot repay this debt. Your people will die for strangers. Considered his answer carefully. Where I come from, we have a saying, a neighbor in need is a neighbor indeed. The needed help, they asked. We answered, there is nothing more complicated about it than that. The small delegate blinked several times. But the cost, the lives lost, the resources spent, surely you calculated whether the benefit outweighs the sacrifice. No, said simply. We did not calculate anything. Someone was suffering and asked us to help. That is all we needed to know. Far from the political chambers, Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Steadfast, and watched the system grow larger in her display. She was 60 years old, had served in the fleet for 4 decades, and had never commanded a force this badly outnumbered. Her tactical officer reported the enemy positions. 512 warships in system. Approximately 300 are engaged in orbital bombardment. The remaining 200 have formed a defensive perimeter. Studied the formation. They were confident, perhaps too confident. They had positioned their ships to repel any attack from the main approach vectors, but they had left gaps near the planet itself. They expected any enemy to engage the defensive line first. Humans did not always do what was expected. Signal the fleet, ordered. We are going to split into 3 groups. First group engages the defensive line to draw attention. Second group moves to protect refugee evacuation routes. Third group provides cover for troop transports heading to the surface. Her executive officer looked up from his console. Admiral, that leaves our forces badly divided. They could concentrate their fire and destroy us piece by piece. Yes, they could, but our primary mission is not to defeat them. Our primary mission is to save lives. They are dying down there while we talk. Every minute matters. The fleet divided as ordered, each group moving to its assigned position. Watched them go. knowing that many of these ships and crews would not survive the coming hours. She thought about writing letters to families, to parents and spouses and children who would receive news that their loved ones had died far from home. She opened a channel to the defensive fleet. Her words would be broadcast across all frequencies, heard by friend and enemy alike, recorded for history to judge. This is Admiral Cole of the Human Defense Force. You have attacked our friends. You have murdered civilians. You have violated every principle of civilized behavior. I am giving you exactly 1 hour to withdraw your forces from this system. If you refuse, we will remove you ourselves. There will be no second warning. There will be no negotiation. You asked for war. Now you have it. The hour passed in silence. No ship moved toward withdrawal, had not expected them to. She had not wanted them to. All ships, she said quietly, weapons free. Show them what humans do when someone hurts our friends. The stars above Prime erupted in fire. Watched the human fleet approach and felt something he had not experienced in decades of conquest. Curiosity. These small creatures with their fragile bodies and their tiny fleet were actually going to attack him. They knew they were outnumbered 6-1. They knew they had never lost a war. And still they came. He admired their courage, in the way a hunter might admire particularly brave prey. Destroy them, he ordered casually. Start with the largest vessels and work down. His fleet moved to engage. Warships were built for intimidation as much as combat, massive vessels bristling with weapons that could crack planetary crusts. They had conquered 11 worlds with these ships, broken the resistance of species far more powerful than humans. This would be easy. It was not easy. The human ships did not behave like any enemy had faced before. They moved in perfect coordination, each vessel covering for others, creating overlapping fields of fire that made targeting difficult. When one ship took critical damage, it did not retreat. Instead, it positioned itself between weapons and its undamaged companions, absorbing fire that would have destroyed functional vessels. They were using their dying ships as shields. His tactical officer reported, "The humans have destroyed 18 of our vessels." Turned sharply, 18, how is that possible? They are targeting our weapons system specifically. Precision strikes that disable our offensive capability without destroying the ships entirely. Our damaged vessels are blocking firing solutions for undamaged ones. Clever, these humans were very clever, but cleverness would not save them. Ordered his fleet to spread out to surround the human formation and crush it from all sides. Numbers would tell eventually. Physics always won. Then the troop transports arrived. They came through the gaps in the formation, the same gaps that had been left because no enemy was supposed to get that close. Small ships, barely armed, moving at maximum speed toward the planet's surface, realized with sudden clarity that the human warships were not trying to win this battle. They were buying time. "Stop those transports," he commanded. His ships tried to respond, but the human fleet adjusted instantly. They threw themselves into the path of every weapon aimed at the transports, taking hits that tore through their hulls, and still they held formation. Watched a human cruiser position itself directly between his flagship and a cluster of transports. The cruiser lasted 47 seconds before it broke apart, but by then the transports were through. On the surface of Prime, Sergeant Tony Martinez felt his transport hit ground hard enough to rattle his teeth. He was first out the door, weapon up, scanning for threats. His team followed in perfect order, spreading out to secure the landing zone. The city around them was burning. Ground forces had swept through this area hours ago, destroying everything they touched. Bodies lay in the streets, civilians who had been caught outside when the attack came. Tony forced himself not to look too closely. There would be time to mourn later. Right now, living people needed help. "Movement on the left," one of his soldiers reported. Tony turned and saw them, a group of huddled in the ruins of what might have been a school. Adults surrounded children, their compound eyes reflecting the flames that consumed their world. They did not run when they saw the human soldiers. They had nowhere left to run. "Easy," Tony said, lowering his weapon and raising his empty hand. "We are here to help. Can you understand me?" One of the adults stepped forward slowly. The translation device on Tony's collar converted her clicks and whistles into words. "You are human. We heard rumors that humans were coming. We did not believe." "Believe it. We have evacuation ships in orbit. We are going to get you out of here." They looked at him with an expression he could not read. Why would you do this? We are nothing to you." Tony did not have time for philosophy. "You asked for help, we answer. That is how it works. Now please follow us. We need to move quickly." 3 blocks away, Nurse Ellen Park had set up a field hospital in the basement of a collapsed building. She had been on the ground for 4 hours and had not stopped working for a single minute. Wounded filled every available space, their injuries ranging from burns to broken limbs to internal damage that required immediate surgery. Ellen did not know much about biology. None of the human medical team did, but they had downloaded every available file during the journey here, and they were learning fast. The basics were similar enough to human physiology that standard techniques worked, with modifications. When standard techniques did not work, they improvised. A patrol found them 2 hours after landing. Ellen heard the gunfire above and knew the security team was engaging. She also knew they were badly outnumbered. The logical thing to do was evacuate, to save herself and the medical supplies that would be needed elsewhere. She kept working. The patient in front of her had internal bleeding that would kill her in minutes without intervention. Ellen found the damaged organ, clamped the vessel, and began repairs. Dust fell from the ceiling as explosions shook the building. She did not look up. The security team held the entrance for 11 minutes. When Tony Martinez arrived with reinforcements, they found 3 dead humans and 9 dead. Ellen was still in the basement, still working, still saving lives. "Nurse Park," Tony said, "we need to move, more are coming." Ellen finished her current patient and finally looked up. Her hands were covered in blue blood. Her face was streaked with dust and sweat. She had not eaten in 8 hours. "I have 12 patients who cannot be moved safely," she said, "so I am not going anywhere." Tony started to argue, then stopped. He recognized the look in her eyes. He had seen it in mirrors. "Then we hold here," he said. "Get me ammunition and water. It is going to be a long night." In orbit, received reports that confused him. Human soldiers were not advancing on positions. They were not trying to capture territory or destroy infrastructure. They were evacuating civilians, setting up medical stations, distributing food and water to refugees. "This makes no tactical sense," he told his officers. "They are wasting resources on beings who have no military value." One of his officers suggested that it might be a deception, a way to lure forces into ambushes. Considered this possibility, but the reports did not support it. Humans were genuinely prioritizing civilian survival over military objectives. They were losing soldiers to protect people who could not help them win. Then new contacts appeared on his sensors. More human ships emerging from faster-than-light travel. Not just warships this time. Cargo vessels, hospital ships, colony transports converted to carry refugees. Humanity was not just sending a fleet. They were sending everything they had. Stared at the display and felt something new. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. He had faced enemies who fought for territory, for resources, for survival. He had never faced an enemy who fought for strangers. He did not understand these creatures at all. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Reporter 3 was a synthetic being, created specifically for journalism, capable of processing information from thousands of sources simultaneously. She had covered wars before, documented atrocities and heroism in equal measure, always maintaining the professional detachment her programming required. But what she witnessed at Prime tested even her artificial objectivity. Her broadcasts reached billions of viewers across hundreds of worlds. Species who had never heard of humanity now watched human soldiers carry wounded through burning streets. They watched human medics work until they collapsed from exhaustion, then get up and work more. They watched human pilots fly directly into weapons fire to protect evacuation transports filled with strangers. I am standing in what remains of the city of Prime Central, 3 reported, her camera drones capturing the destruction around her. Behind me, you can see a human field hospital treating civilians. The medical staff here has been operating continuously for 72 hours. When I asked the lead surgeon why they did not rest, she looked at me as if the question made no sense. She moved through the hospital, recording everything. A human doctor was teaching volunteers how to assist with basic procedures. A human nurse was singing softly to a frightened child while cleaning her wounds. A human soldier with bandages covering half his face was helping to carry supplies despite his own injuries. 3 approached the soldier. "Excuse me, you are wounded. Why are you not receiving treatment?" The soldier looked at her with his one visible eye. "Others need it more than me. I can still walk. I can still carry. That means I can still help. But your injuries could worsen without proper care." Then they worsen. These people are dying. Some of them are dying because we did not get here fast enough. Every minute I spend getting bandaged is a minute I am not spending keeping them alive. He picked up another crate of medical supplies and walked away. The interview spread across the galaxy within hours. Comment sections exploded with debate. Some viewers called the humans foolish, throwing away their lives for a species that could never repay them. Others called them heroes. Many simply expressed confusion. This behavior did not match any model of how civilizations were supposed to act. In the Galactic Assembly chambers, representatives watched the broadcasts in uncomfortable silence. The delegation had called an emergency session, though no one was quite sure what to do with it. Elder of the had requested permission to address the assembly directly. She was ancient by her species standards, her exoskeleton showing the marks of many decades. She had been evacuated on one of the first human transports, but had insisted on speaking before seeking safety. "I have watched my world burn," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "I have watched my people die by the millions. I sent a message asking for help, not believing anyone would answer. The Galactic Assembly promised to form a committee. The great powers expressed sympathy but offered nothing more." She paused, her compound eyes moving across the gathered representatives. Then the humans came, not with words but with ships, not with promises but with soldiers. They did not ask what we could give them in return. They did not calculate whether helping us would benefit their interests. They simply came. Gestured to the screens showing the ongoing battle. I watched a human medic named Ellen Park work for 4 days without sleep, treating wounds she had never seen before, learning our biology through trial and error because there was no one else to do it. When enemy soldiers found her hospital, she refused to evacuate. She said her patients could not be moved, so she would not move either. She is still there now, still working, still saving lives. The chamber was completely silent. I watched a human soldier carry one of our children for 12 kilometers through a war zone. He was bleeding from wounds in his side and leg. When he finally reached the evacuation point, he refused treatment until every civilian in his group had been processed. He died an hour later from blood loss. He never told anyone his name. Turned to face the human delegation directly. "Why? That is what everyone asks. Why would your people do this? Why would they die for us?" Secretary General Blake stood slowly. Every eye in the chamber focused on him. "Because you asked," he said simply. "You were suffering, you called for help. We heard you. That is all the reason we have ever needed." "But the cost," said, "your ships destroyed, your people killed. You have sacrificed so much for strangers." "You are not strangers," replied. "You are neighbors, and where we come from, neighbors help each other. It does not matter if we have never met. It does not matter if we speak different languages or have different bodies or come from different stars. When someone needs help and we can provide it, we help. That is what makes us human." The silence that followed lasted nearly a minute. Then something unexpected happened. The representative rose from his seat. The ancient council speaker who had led the assembly for 2 centuries stood beside him. They walked together to the human delegation and stopped in front of Blake. "Secretary General," said, his voice carrying across the chamber, "I have spent 200 years trying to maintain peace through careful diplomacy and measured response. I believe that was the only way. Your people have shown me that I was wrong." He turned to address the full assembly. "The Confederacy is dispatching a relief fleet to Prime. We will arrive within 48 hours. Before the murmurs could fully develop, another representative stood. Then another. Within an hour, 12 species had pledged ships, supplies, or personnel to support the human effort. Not because the assembly had approved it, not because committees had been formed, but because they had watched humans die for strangers and they were ashamed of their own inaction. Captain Stephen Ford received the news aboard his hospital ship, the Gentle Hope. He had been coordinating refugee evacuation for 2 weeks, moving his vessel between weapons fire and transport ships filled with civilians. His hull was with impact marks. 3 of his crew had died when a missile had breached the medical bay. "Allied ships incoming," his communications officer reported, her voice filled with disbelief. "At least 10 other species I do not recognize." Stephen stared at the display showing the approaching vessels. For 2 weeks, humanity had fought alone. For 2 weeks, they had bled and died while the galaxy watched. He had begun to believe that no one would ever come. "Signal them," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion and emotion. "Tell them welcome. Tell them we have work to do. Tell them." He stopped, unable to finish. His communications officer understood. "I will tell them we are glad they are here, Captain." "Yes," Stephen said, "tell them that." The galaxy was finally answering the call. 3 weeks into the war, stood on his bridge and faced a reality he had never imagined possible. His fleet, the pride of the Dominion, was exhausted. His soldiers, veterans of 11 successful conquests, were demoralized, and the humans were still fighting. They had lost 22 ships. 4,000 of their people were dead. By any reasonable calculation, they should have surrendered or retreated days ago. Instead, they kept coming. Every time he destroyed one of their vessels, another appeared to take its place. Every time he overran one of their positions, they established another. And now they were no longer alone. A battle group had arrived first, 3 massive warships that immediately began engaging forces near the evacuation corridors. Then a cruiser squadron appeared, their weapons technology different from human designs but equally effective. Ships from a dozen other species followed, some small and some large, all of them joining the fight without waiting for orders from anyone. His tactical officer approached nervously. "Coalition forces now outnumber us. Our supply lines are stretched thin. The troops on the surface are taking casualties faster than we can reinforce them. What are your orders?" The stared at the tactical display for a long moment. He had never retreated from a battlefield. The Dominion did not retreat, but the Dominion had also never faced anything like this. "Signal the fleet," he said finally. "We are withdrawing." His officers stared at him in shock. One dared to speak. "If we retreat now, the High Council will." "The High Council is not here." They did not watch humans use their dying ships as shields. They did not see enemy soldiers carry wounded civilians through fire. They did not face an enemy who does not know how to give up. Turned away from the display. "We came here to conquer a defenseless world. Now half the galaxy stands against us because of what we did. This war is already lost. The only question is how many more of our people die before we accept it." The fleet began its withdrawal an hour later. Human and allied ships did not pursue. They were too busy saving lives to chase a defeated enemy. On the surface of Prime, the news spread slowly. Sergeant Tony Martinez heard it from a passing medic while he was helping to distribute food to refugees. He stopped what he was doing and sat down heavily on a piece of rubble that might once have been part of a home. "It is over," he said quietly. Nurse Ellen Park found him there 10 minutes later. She looked even more exhausted than he felt, her eyes shadowed, and her hands still stained with the blood of patients she had fought to save. She sat down beside him without speaking. They stayed there together, watching civilians move through the ruined streets. Children who had lost everything were playing a game in the wreckage, their clicks and whistles almost like laughter. Adults were beginning to clear debris, the first steps toward rebuilding what had been destroyed. "Was it worth it?" Tony asked after a while. Ellen considered the question. 4,000 of us died, 22 ships destroyed, billions of credits in equipment and supplies. "That is not what I asked." She looked at him, then at the child who was approaching them with something clutched in her small manipulator arms. The child stopped in front of Tony and held out what she was carrying. It was a flower, somehow still alive despite everything, its petals a deep purple that seemed to glow in the dim light. The child's translation device rendered her words in a small, clear voice. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for helping. We will never forget." Tony took the flower gently. "You are welcome." The child clicked happily and ran back to her family. Ellen watched her go with something that might have been a smile. "Yes," she said finally, "it was worth it." 1 year later, the Galactic Assembly looked very different than it had before the crisis. The chamber was the same. The representatives still sat in their tiered sections, but the atmosphere had changed in ways that could not be measured. A new protocol had been adopted, nicknamed the Human Doctrine by those who had watched it develop. When a member species requested emergency aid, the response was no longer committees and discussions. Ships moved within hours. Resources flowed within days. The bureaucracy that had let the nearly die was still there, but it had learned to step aside when lives were at stake. Secretary General Blake addressed the Assembly on the anniversary of humanity's declaration of war. His hair was a little grayer now, his face showing new lines from a year of stress and difficult decisions. But his voice was as steady as ever. 1 year ago, humanity made a choice, he said. Someone was suffering and asked for help. We could have done what everyone expected. We could have waited for proper authorization, formed committees, debated appropriate responses. Instead, we went. We fought. Many of our people died. He paused, looking across the gathered representatives. I do not stand here to claim that humanity is special or superior. We are one species among many, with our own flaws and failures. But I believe that what we did last year matters. Not because we won, but because we tried. Not because we saved everyone, but because we did not look away. Captain Daniel Price watched the speech from the observation deck of the Horizon's Edge, now repaired and returned to service. Commander Lisa Grant stood beside him, both of them thinking about the friends they had lost. "Do you think it changed anything?" Lisa asked. Daniel considered the question as he watched a convoy of ships passing below them. The convoy carried relief supplies to a world on the far side of the galaxy, where a natural disaster had displaced millions. The ships came from 7 different species, all of them responding to a call for help. "Look at that convoy," he said. "A year ago that would not have happened. Those species would have debated for months before sending anything. Now they respond in hours. So yes, I think it changed something. But will it last? I do not know. Maybe the galaxy will forget. Maybe the next crisis will be too far away or too inconvenient or too dangerous, and everyone will go back to committees and debates." He turned to face her. "But maybe not. Maybe what we did showed people what is possible. Maybe the next time someone asks for help, they will remember Prime. A new distress signal arrived at Centrum Station 3 days later. A minor species on the edge of known space was facing a crisis. Their request was desperate, their need immediate. This time, 17 species responded within the hour. Their ships launched before any committee could form, before any debate could begin. They went because someone was suffering and had asked for help. They went because a year ago, humans had shown them that this was possible. Humanity had not just answered one call for help. They had taught the galaxy how to answer all of them. And somewhere among the stars, on a world that was slowly healing from wounds that should have killed it, a child looked up at the sky and wondered which of those distant lights were human ships. She still had the flower she had given to the soldier, pressed flat and preserved, a reminder of the strangers who had come to save her people. She did not understand why they had done it. She was not sure she ever would, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. If anyone ever asked her for help, she would answer. That was what neighbors did.